Hello, and welcome to 30 Plays in 30 Days, a live arts retrospective. I'm Ann Hunter, the new executive director. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Tonight, we'll be revisiting the 2001-2002 season. In a moment, I'll be joined by director, retired UVA professor, and visual artist, bet you didn't know that, Betsy Tucker. We also have the pleasure of welcoming 4 original cast members from the live arts production of Cloud 9, Chris Patrick, Ian Unterman, Liz Roccaforte, and Kader Cuervo. But first, let me do a quick shout out to tonight's tech facilitator, the man behind the curtain, Ray Netzel. I'd also like to recognize our community partner, Alton Lane, a custom tailor that has turned the menswear industry on its head. If you don't know them, this is a great time to book a free virtual closet review, where an Alton Lane expert will walk you through your closet and help you decide what to keep, like your grandfather's silk tuxedo jacket, circa 1950. That's what my husband has. What to toss, every pair of pleated pants you own, sorry to say, and what to add, a custom linen shirt maybe. Their Charlottesville showroom opened last Saturday, and teams are looking forward to serve you either in person or remotely. So thanks for being such a great friend of live arts, Alton Lane. And now, please welcome the woman who was once impersonated by Tina Fey, live arts' own Betsy Tucker. And there she is. Hi. Hi.
Hi, Ann.
Thank you for joining us for episode 12, Betsy.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
We're thrilled to have you. So you and I first met when I was interviewing for the Live Arts Executive Director position last December.
Mm-hmm.
You asked a prescient question about the changing nature of theater in Charlottesville. Did you know something that maybe we didn't know last December? How it changed?
I wish I'd had.
Yeah.
All our lives might be different.
Well, right. Why don't you go back a little further and tell us how you first got involved with live arts,
Sure.
What keeps you coming back, and what you're doing now.
First, I had been aware of live arts, I think after maybe like the 3rd season. I had students like Christian Keithley who were engaged in it. And so I saw a couple of shows, and then I went to see my friend Kay Ferguson in The Visit. And at that evening, I walked up to John Gibson and I said, I need to work with you. And he said, oh, I've been meaning to talk to you. And so we got together. I love community theater. I was trained by a guy who had been a major community theater director in the Midwest. And so I've always loved community theater and worked in several in the Midwest as well as here eventually. So I was invited, I guess at that point, one made a proposal. So I proposed to direct Mrs. Warren's Profession. And asked me the question he always asked, which is why this, why now? And I came up with an answer that was good enough. And I remember
something pithy.
Fran was in the background painting the set for something that was coming up. And so we did that show. And then I directed a lot of shows at Live Arts since then.
You told me something like 60 shows in your professional career.
Actually, Ann, I went back and counted 78.
Oh,
78 shows. Yeah.
That is worth putting up on the trophy shelf. Wow.
Gray hair.
Curly hair.
Yeah.
So I read that you liked working with, quote, good grown-up actors and mixing them in with talented UVA students.
Right.
So what made that particular combination so appealing to you?
I guess I did it in grad school. I actually directed a community theater production as one of my 3 thesis productions in grad school in Minnesota. I just think that the students grow up, they see what theater is like beyond the bubble of the university, which is just barely it's different, but can be very insular and sort of self-congratulatory as their high school experiences may have been. So it's a step toward the professional world. You don't just get to cut rehearsals because you were drunk last night. And it's always engaging to be around 20-year-olds, so it's delightful for the grown-ups too. And the ones I choose for my shows are really good, so it ups the ante on both sides.
Yeah, for the students and for the adults. Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue to look at our collection of photos and memorabilia back from the 2001-2002 season.
Right.
That's when we were still in the Mickey building, for those of you who remember.
Oh, yeah.
So of course you do. So it'll be up here in a second. First show was Wit by Margaret Edson.
Yep, there's Zumi, who is a staple.
Oh, I didn't recognize her.
That's
oh my
her.
gosh.
She either cut her hair really short or perhaps shaved it, because
I think it was shaved in one of the later pictures.
Yeah, the character is dying of cancer. On the right, you see Mark Valahovic, who you will see again in Cloud 9 pictures. He was a staple those years of leading men. Really interesting guy. He was a chemistry PhD student. He was a musician, and he seemed to be in every show at Live Arts for his PhD career.
Wow.
Yeah.
Say one thing about Bill Ruff, who directed this. He is going to be joining us tomorrow night for 30. He's the guest, featured guest tomorrow night. Just
great. Bill was also a graduate student, a grown-up graduate student at UVA. I don't remember whether that was before or after. He slipped in this program at some point. So he's another interesting, sort of crossover between the two theaters. Edward II. Boomy and I walked this afternoon so I could get the lowdown on Edward II. I still don't exactly know, but I suspect, because I didn't get an email back from Will, but I suspect that this show was prompted by John really wanted to do this show, and I expect it was prompted by seeing it in Edinburgh. And he was in the show, and they hired a director from Richmond, a professional director, to direct this. And several actors, including the lead actors, were also, I think, paid to come and be in this show.
Was that unusual for Live Arts?
It was, oh yeah, I think there was a lot of pushback from that too, and became part of a sort of, we won't do that anymore. Or eventually that became the thing. There were women playing men. It was a lot of sort of androgynous sex, a kind of underlying homoerotic theme going on. The costumes were stupendous. They were by Catherine Rowe, who was the costumer at UVA, and she really had an eye for these modern, sexy costumes. The dresser was the Corey Jo Lloyd, of course, who dressed about 1,000 shows at Live Arts. Boomy was in it. Sarah Merkel was in it. Rhonda was in it. Chris Esty, it was his first show at Live Arts, according to Boomy. Okay, and then we have Cloud 9. Okay, so Cloud 9, this I co-directed with Satch Huizinga. So, and I do want to give Satch credit because he really was responsible for a lot of the goings on of this rehearsal. We had trouble designing the set. John designed it, and he roped in finally, had trouble getting a set designer. He roped in Cecilia Hernandez, and then they still had trouble with the concept. Finally, John got this concept of underwear being pulled down. So we had these screens and fabric that the actors between the sets pulled down the Union Jack.
I think we see that on the next slide.
Yeah, I think that actually is the first act scenery. I can't remember which was spiffier than the second act scenery. So I think we used it in the second act photo, which is this is a second act photo. But anyway, the set was an issue. Mark Valahovic, who played Harry, he's there kind of in the blue t-shirt in the center. He also wrote, we saw him in the last show, he wrote the music for this show, another one of his talents, aside from chemistry PhD. This was one of the first shows that had a props master. Generally the assistant stage manager or stage manager came up with the props for shows, and I'd come from UVA. And I said, well, that won't do. So I roped in a student up there, a former student, Colby Smith, there with the blonde hair, to do props. And he was wonderful. He came up with a wedding cake and all sorts of odd things we had to have for that show. Again, Corey Joe dressed the show and performed the amazing 90-second or less, like 70-second costume change that Ian had to go, Ian there in the center in the white shirt. He played a like leather-clad gay guy in Act 2, but he had to go back to playing Betty, which you will see him play, the Victorian lady. So he had to go from a leather-clad guy at the end of Act 1 in 70 or 90 seconds into full Victorian wigged costume change.
Whew, we'll ask him about that when he comes on.
And yeah, nobody said they could do it, but they did. And The Wiz. Now I got a long email from Clinton about The Wiz. What he remembers most was that the music, because Patrick Reed said you have to do hip hop with this. So they what did he say here? I ran into Patrick Reed on the mall, told him the idea, and he said, well, you have to do hip hop. So by the time we got to performance, we had the whole hip hop soundtrack under the spoken dialogue. We had DJs spinning records. So as soon as Dorothy arrived at odds, the needle dropped and there was music. It was all due to Patrick's work. He suggested hip hop. He found the DJ. He sat down with me and we went through his record collection. It was, of course,
back when they had records.
Yeah, it was, of course, a grievously wanton violation of copyright law on multiple levels, but we were young and inexperienced.
We didn't hear that, right? It had a huge cast, too.
Yes, and I talked to Adrienne Oliver, who's also the young Adrienne Oliver, this was not her first show, but she's in there, and she said she ate about 5 tubes of glitter lipstick during the show, and that what she remembers was the enormous solidarity of the all-Black cast and the talkbacks, where there were all these microaggressions from the audience, which prompted the cast to sort of dig deeper into the role of African Americans in the theater and in Charlottesville theater. So it was productive on both sides of the curtain line, I think. Mm-hmm. It was a lively show. I certainly saw it. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Mindy St. Hours knocked it out of the park in that. This was one of the most perfect shows I think I remember seeing, and I don't say that often of any show. She was just terrific.
What made it so? And this was directed by Fran Smith.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Mindy was great. Jim Johnson as Big Daddy was terrific. There was this wonderfully sexy actor playing Ansem playing Brick, a guy I really wanted to get my hands on, and he disappeared before I could. I don't know what happened to him.
You heard about the glitter lipstick.
It was just a really well staged, a nice environment. I think the audience was on at least 2 sides, if not 3, of the set. It just really felt like you were in that steamy hot room. It was a great production. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there they all are. No doubt Corey Joe is changing costumes backstage, I'm sure. Will Davis was in that, little Will Davis. Oh my God, look at him, he's so tiny. Miss Davis kids and Rhonda. Oh, look at those people. I love to see them again.
Great costuming too.
Floyd Collins. John really wanted to do this show. And when I looked at the pictures, I mean, I did see it, and I think it was something of a hard sell for the audience because we hadn't heard this great musical that John knew.
You likened it to Grapes of Wrath in terms of its weighty working class themes.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm not sure the audience quite knew what to do with that. But I looked at this, I said, oh, what great costumes. And then I looked and saw Cater Gordon, who you will see playing Lynn in My Cloud 9, did the costumes for this show, which really delighted and surprised me. She's also, among her many talents, is a great costume designer. So she did that. This was co-directed by Amanda McRaven, who you'll probably hear from sometime. Chris Estee also played the lead in this show. And that was his second live arts production. He did a great job singing that. Alex Davis, another one of the Davis kids, was in it. Jennifer Pert, Alice Reed, Ernie's daughter, Ernie's son had helped Clinton with the music for The Wiz. So there was that whole family that was engaged. Mm-hmm. Giorgio Litt, a UVA student of mine, was in this. And then the reporters, Dan Stern, Jeff Dreyfuss, and Ken Stroop. I mean, those guys are staples of this theater.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
You told me that Live Arts was known for doing really ambitious experimental works that followed the passions of the actors and maybe the director. So it sounds like this was one of those ones. John really wanted to do it, and there you go.
Yeah, and they did it. And then this Summer Theater Festival, I don't think I saw this one. You know why? I figured it out because this is actually the summer I was in Edinburgh with Live Arts, working the Fringe, and whatever else I was doing in July. I wasn't watching this year. So I saw the next one.
Could you just explain what a summer musical festival is for those who don't know?
Well, they did a bunch of short plays or shortened versions. There may have been a time limit on it. It may have been 90 minutes or less. I don't really remember. They're all fairly short plays they did. Mm-hmm. And people just came in July and August and did these shows, and they were in rep, I think, in different spaces. So kind of the space that is now used for the summer camp and was used for lots of new people to do their thing. It was a way for directors to get in. And the next year, the season I did see, it was, I think, one of the first times Bree directed for the theater in the next season. Mm-hmm. So, but this, I mean, people in some of these plays included Alex Davis, Emma Gibbons, that's one of Boomy's children, Addie Horan, Adam Smith, one of my students from UVA, and my foreign exchange student from, oh no, that's from the Latte House, actually. I think this is from the Latte House. Okay, sorry. So in the Latte House was the Fran's, mm-hmm. Yeah, in the little studio, and she did it with high school students. So we had these kids. Kids. They were high school students at that time. Alex and Emma and Addie and Adam, who's a college student, and my foreign exchange student from Spain, who was rehearsing for Latte House while I was rehearsing for Cloud 9. So we got to come to the theater together.
Yeah, there you go. Bonding time.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you'd like to point out before we bring on our first two guest actors?
No. I mean, you asked me before this question about what it was like to direct in the time. Yeah,
9/11.
This turns out to have been the year of 9/11, which I didn't remember. And I actually asked my actresses at least about that. And they sort of said, it wasn't really on their radar screen either. But I do think that we were rehearsed. I do think that we were a very engaged cast. We did a lot of, it's a play about gender and gender most specifically, but class and colonialism too. But we did a lot of work on that during the rehearsal. And I think it was, we were doing something political in a politicized time. And I think it was a way to channel that energy. And you know what I thought of in the past few hours, I've thought, what's it like to abandon two incredibly relevant political shows as Adrian and I have had to do. My show is to have opened, this weekend, in Adrian's Sweat, which is a working class play about class and unions and race, and incredibly relevant to the current moment.
And you were to be doing the children.
And I was to be doing the children, which is a play about the environment and its costs. And both of these plays are enormously relevant, and they can't be heard right now.
Not right now. Yeah. Yeah.
My cast is very dedicated to the play and is willing to come back. I imagine Adrian's is ever more dedicated too, although some of these people will disperse once the moment is past. But it's interesting to be holding that, be holding that right now.
That's part of the fallout of COVID-19 is we had to cancel half of one show, Men on Boats, and then postpone or move both Sweat and the Children to next season or whenever we can get them back in the theater. Yeah. But it's making room for other creative endeavors, which we are trying to reimagine going into the fall. So,
and doing rather creative at that. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very exciting. It just isn't going to be what we normally have done because this is not a normal time.
Seems to be.
Stay tuned for that. Well, let's bring back our two male actors for the first scene. This is in Cloud 9 by Carol Churchill. And Betsy, do you want to set up this scene for us?
I think I'm going to set up both scenes right now. I think that's the order we're doing it. Okay, so the act 1, they're both early scenes, one from Act 1 and one from Act 2. So we have Chris Patrick in his first role at Live Arts, playing Clive, the patriarch of a British colonial family somewhere in Africa where the natives are restless and the drums are beating outside the door. And his wife, played by Ian Unterman, a man playing a woman, because in this play, which Churchill wrote with the Joint Stock Company after interviewing the cast, and they mixed up all the genders and race actually in the play. So boys play girls and girls play boys and men play women and women play men and men play girls, etc. It gets about as confusing and delightful as it can be. The first act is set in colonial Africa, and the second act is set 100 years later in London, but the characters have only aged 25 years. So we see some of the same characters in Act 2, where we see Cater Gordon playing Lynn, a new character in the play. And we see Victoria, who in Act 1 was played by a doll, a doll, who was actually tossed across the stage at one point. But here she is, a grown woman with children. So we see these two women in a park in London in 1979, which is when the play was written. And John asked me to direct this, and I went, "Oh, John, this is like a pre-AIDS play. You can't really do this play after AIDS. It has one disturbing monologue, which Ian tends to disturbed audiences. Ian's monologue at the top, or in Act 2, where he describes a confrontation with another man on the tube in London, and I said, this doesn't work. John said, no, you can do it. And he was right.
John can be very convincing.
Well, I actually directed the play sort of 5 years later at UVA too. So it's one of the several.
You got over it.
Yeah. Another thing I remember, actually, to go back for a minute, about directing a political play. I directed another of Churchill's plays a couple of years later, Far Away, during Guantanamo, and in that play we made use of that image for a sort of silent 15-minute parade of prisoners echoing the Guantanamo. So there are times when you can use the political moment or reinforce the moment, the live moment on stage. Yeah. That was a lucky one. That was a lucky one. Churchill is open for that. Yeah. But here we go, Act 1 of Cloud 9 in Africa, and then followed by Act 2 in London 25 years later.
Good job, ladies. Good job, gentlemen. Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. That was wonderful.
We had costumes.
I think you won the best award for costumes and props so far in 30 and 30. So take a bow for that.
Thanks.
Would each of you like to talk about how you got involved with Live Arts? different stories for each of you?
Sure.
Do you want to start?
Shall I start? Yes. I was in school, and I had the great fortune to take an acting class with Betsy Tucker, which started by me being so angry because on the first day she was like, just so you know, you're not getting an A in this class if you're not talented. You can't just show up and do your work and get an A. And I was like, that is crazy. If I show up and then I got, I got an A, and I was like, oh, this is the best thing that ever happened in my life. And then Betsy at some point recruited me to come down to Live Arts, and that was my first exposure to Live Arts at all. And I got to work on the show with her. And then, sorry, one just quick thing that I remember from doing this show, which we were just talking about in the waiting room beforehand, is I had to put it on full drag and heels and a whalebone corset and a wig and the whole thing for this show for the first act. And so Corey Jo Lloyd was amazing, would help me put her knee in my back and tighten up my whalebone corset and all this stuff. And at the beginning of the run, I was asking her to help me do my eyeliner because I'm not that good at it. And we're getting ready for the show or dress rehearsal or whatever it was. And Betsy came through in sort of a pre-show kind of maelstrom, swinging through the dressing room, and notes are coming around. She turns and she looks at Corey Jo putting on my eyeliner, and she goes, "Real actors put on their own makeup, Ian," and walks out. I was like, okay, Corey, I'll take that pencil, and if I only have one eye after this, just guide me to my car. but that was I think the last time someone else put on my makeup for a really long time for anything. So anyway, that was a fun moment.
Well, you're looking lovely this evening, Ian.
Oh, thank you. My skills have regressed significantly since then, but I sure once upon a time.
The whiskers add a lot. Liz, you want to jump in?
Oh, sure. So I ended up in Charlottesville in a really weird way. Like I'm from Southern California. I went to Irvine, UC Irvine undergrad, and did theater there, and graduated and moved to New York with all of my friends to just be famous. And I was there about 4 months, and it was pretty bad. And my mom, who's Chris Courtenay, who directed several shows at Live Arts, was living in Charlottesville. So I had to crawl back and live with my mother after college. And she was like, you should audition, at Live Arts, they do great work. And so I did, and I got cast, and, I have such good memories. It's the only show I ever did there. I left and moved to Cleveland not too long after the close, but it was such a happy, I still have such happy memories of it. And that's why seeing everyone was such a gift, just to kind of relive that time.
Yeah, wonderful. How about you, Cater?
I was a student at UVA, and all the cool kids like Ian and from the upper classes were doing work at Live Arts. And so it was like, if you were a serious theater student, we would try to like get into a show there. And Betsy was just, a goddess. And so I think I came over for this show. And then through working at Live Arts, I was given a lot of opportunity to do things like costume design and gosh, I don't know. I feel like I did a little bit of everything there, but it was really great for me because I didn't necessarily have the skills right off the bat to do stuff on the main stages at UVA, and Live Arts was an awesome experience to get to work with real adults and learn a lot.
Betsy was talking about that at the beginning of the segment, about how she was pairing UVA students with grown-up adults and how they learn from each other. Yeah, wonderful.
And I would say even now, 18 or so years later, like some of my best friends are still the people that I met at Live Arts, and those are the ones that I call. John Gibson and I do a weekly call, and John Owen and I do throw costume parties yearly. And so those relationships, I feel like, gave me a lot of confidence in the skills that I had, just to kind of get a stamp that you can do creative work and explore what's in you in a really legitimatized way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Chris?
So Cloud9 was my first show at Live Arts. My ex-wife and I had moved to Charlottesville for her job. She was working at UVA, and I was really excited when I had looked at Live Arts' website and saw the kind of work that they were doing. It was not a typical community theater where you're doing the same 3 shows every couple of years. So I was already preparing for auditions even before I moved. And Cloud9 was actually the 3rd show at Live Arts I auditioned for before I had gotten cast. I didn't realize this about Betsy until I worked with her as her assistant director. And Betsy, I hope I'm not revealing a trade secret, but it's a good trade secret. So I'm not too feeling too badly about sharing it. So Betsy makes a point of regularly when she's casting that half of the cast, she wants new people. And so, you know, it's a risk to cast someone that you haven't, even if they do a good job in auditions, you just don't know what their work habits are. You don't know what they're going to be like to work with. It's a real risk. And the fact that she, with every show, takes that risk to bring in new blood was a real help to me. That's how I got started at Live Arts, and I've been performing there ever since. But it's also really helpful and healthy for the organization to continuously have new people that are coming in and have a chance to participate when it might be easy to be not intentional about being cliquish, but it's just easier when you know the people, like you know what your risks are. And so I think the fact that Live Arts and Betsy take those chances, that's one of the reasons that Live Arts is so great.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that piece. Any favorite stories that you would like to share before we wrap up? Besides the amazing costume change with the whalebone corset.
I'll say that we had an amazing talk back after strike. Sat us down and said, okay, you've done this. We've done some sort of Brechtian political work. What are your responses? And it was, I mean, for me, I don't know. I think my deep engagement is in rehearsal. And so, you know, sort of, that's where I'm profoundly moved in the process. But it was remarkable to me, the sort of things the actors said at the end and how important that production had been for each of them for various ways, how challenging it had been for them. And they were very intimate about that at the end. It was one of my most memorable theater experiences was that talk back at the end of the show.
That's saying a lot given 70 some shows you've produced in your professional life. How did the audience respond?
I think they loved it. I mean, I didn't mention, we also had Missel Leddington and Stephen Getman and Mark Valahovic were in the show, and I haven't contacted them. They were all crazy in their own way in that show. The audience, I think, loved it, didn't they? Guys, what do you remember?
Yeah, I remember it being, I remember feeling like one of those, it's kind of rare moments sometimes where you feel like you're breathing at the same time as the audience, you know, like there are these magical moments where you feel like people are just right with you, you know, and it didn't happen every night probably or every scene, but you know, this play has the ability to do that in some way or another.
We got a little glimpse of that when you were doing your parts on Zoom. So even defied the medium and reached out and connected with people. So thank you for that.
We had a sing along. The show includes, in the script, there is a boy's best friend is his mother. Remember this, Ian? And we had little cards like a Victorian music hall thing, and we sing along to the lyrics. So, I mean, there was that moment of audience engagement where they actually had to engage in the song, the play on that level. And Chris also did this amazing intermission thing where we gave away a free pair of British pants.
Oh, yeah. You forgot about that.
Boxers?
We gave away a pair of British boxers. And Chris was, I mean, he'd been performing his guts out and he was like terrified to do this audience intermission thing that we asked him to do, to give away free pants every day. It was pretty funny. We had some good ideas in that show. They kept coming.
Very Live Artsian. Yeah. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
There's two quick things that makes me think of. One is there's one moment in the show where there's a slap, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I pretend to slap Liz when Liz is my son in the first act. Is that right? And I can't remember. Anyway, but Cater would make the nap, and so she had these two blocks that were like painted like Union Jacks. She would hide them, and I would you know, put my hand, you know, 2 feet away from Liz's face because it was clearly fake, but you'd hear the smack, and that's how we did it. And it was a, you know, really nice, again, sort of Brechtian stage convention. Anyway, one night I haul off and I swipe my hand past Liz, and the nap happens, and like the block in Cater's hand explodes into like 3 pieces. There were just these 2 little like, and one of them breaks into like 3 pieces, and we get off stage, and I turned to Cater and I was like, oh my God, that was crazy. That thing just exploded in your hand when you did the nap. Cater goes, what? And I was like, the block that was in your hand exploded into multiple pieces when you hit it together. She's like, really? God, so in the moment, I had no idea.
Vic is
I'm
not
being like, you are locked in. I need to reach this level. This is. And then the other one that I just will never forget, Satch always saying to me, like, Satch used to, I would get in trouble for milking jokes, believe it or not, making bits and milking jokes. And so he would say, if he felt I was milking a joke, the first time he said, put away your stool and pail. And I didn't understand what he was saying. He's like, you're milking the joke, put away the stool and pail. And I was like, that's pretty good. I'm going to steal that. I've been using that.
It's a very Wisconsin kind of metaphor.
Yeah, that phrase, I always like that. Put away the stool and pail. Come on.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming, all of you, Liz, Cater, Chris, Betsy, Ian. What a delightful way to spend an evening. Let me just do a little bit of wrap up here. Thanks to all the audience members who joined us tonight. If you feel so moved, please consider making a donation to Live Arts on Thursday evening, not tonight, Thursday evening, when your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $10,000, thanks to the generous challenge grant from the Mad Woman Project. And just so you know, John Gibson will be the guest that evening, and he'll be talking about the year that we moved from the Mickey building to the current Water Street location. So it'll be a great show. Actually, they all are great. Be sure to join us tomorrow evening when we'll be talking about the 2002-2003 season with our moderator, Jeremy Pape, and guest Bill Ruff. So thank you again, and we hope to see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.